a funny guy.
I mean it, Craig. He's not himself. It's as if he has something on his mind.
Like what? Getting all the dog hairs off Miss Silverstein's quilt? Figuring out a polite way to tell Mr. White that if he doesn't start washing his neck, his shirt collars will be permanently stained? What?
I'm serious, Craig. Something's up.
Tough, very tough. I don't know, Miss Hollander. It looks to me like a wine stain that someone tried to remove by hand. You know, you should leave these things to the experts, Miss Hollander. We'll try, but I can't guarantee anything.
Thanks. Is everything okay, Mr. Scripps?
Well, Julie, no. No, look at the stain on this
She
dress.
means you, sir. We were wondering, you seem a little worried.
Well, now that you ask, yes, there is something wrong. I read in the paper just yesterday that if this new tax law goes through, my after-tax income will go down. Which means I may not be able to keep you both on. If I do, it means you may not get those raises I promised.
Wish we hadn't asked.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Do you like it?
It's perfect for homeroom with Miss Freights.
I think I'll buy a dress like this.
Not if you lose your job here, you won't.
I don't know why Mr. Scripps doesn't do something about those tax laws they're talking about changing. You know, like talk to someone in the government.
Right. You should just call up the president and tell me once the tax laws change.
Of course not the president, Craig. But he could talk to members of Congress, you know. Like Congresswoman March. My father's talked to her before about things.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Like about the hazardous waste dumps outside of town, or the pollution in the Green River. He's the head of the Citizens Group for a Cleaner Environment. They try and get laws changed all the time.
Not tax laws, they don't.
Well, I don't know about that. But I do know that it can make a difference. And Scripps could try, too. I'm going to suggest he write Congresswoman March now, before the law is passed. Maybe we can do something.
You're wasting your time. You're wasting his time. No one in government cares what Joe Scribs thinks about tax laws. Nobody cares.
Why are you getting so angry?
I'm not being angry. I'm just being realistic. I happen to know it's not easy being heard by anybody in government, let alone the people in Washington who make tax laws for the whole country. My mother tried it once. She was arrested.
She was?
Yes. She was in a demonstration, and they arrested her for obstructing a public way. She had to pay a fine.
Craig, demonstrating against the government on a busy street is a whole lot different than writing a representative or participating in an interest group.
Well, this is terrific. What, are we carpeting the floor with customers' clothes now, Julie? Who do those belong to?
They belong to...
Well, what happened, huh? You two leave your brains at home today? I'm worrying about giving you a raise? Ha!
Mrs. Pauling, you know how you're always talking in class about how important it is for citizens to participate in the government?
It is important.
Well, is it worth trying to make your views known? Even if it's something really big, like tax laws that affect the whole country?
Of course. The right to express and promote our own views about federal tax policy is guaranteed by the First Amendment to the Constitution. People can communicate their interests to legislators by writing to them or talking to them in person. Or we can join groups like the one your father organized about the environment.
Oh, so it is possible to make your views known, even to the people who make laws.
Sure. Lawmakers listen to their constituents who try to influence their decisions during the formal lawmaking process. But it takes a while. You can't change laws overnight. Is there a reason for these questions?
Sort of. My boss at the dry cleaner is real unhappy about some new law they're talking about passing. I thought I could help him.
Well, why don't you ask Congresswoman March what she could do when she comes to visit the school next week? She'll be speaking with all the social studies classes, and there'll be time for questions. Think about it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Excuse me, Congresswoman. There's a Mrs. Pauling on the phone.
Thank you. Hello, Mary. I have you on my calendar for next week if that's why you're calling. That's a good suggestion. I'll direct my comments to the formal process of how a tax bill becomes a law. Right. And then maybe we'll discuss how the students can participate in the process. Sure, I can use last year's tax legislation as an example. See you next week.
Congresswoman, you have 2 calls waiting. One's from Mr. Simpson of the Citizens for Fair Taxes. He wants you to oppose House Bill 2906. And another call from Mrs. Reese from People for Tax Justice. She wants you to support that bill. Who should I put through first?
Mr. Scripps,
Yeah, Julie?
I've been thinking, and you could write a letter to Congresswoman March about those new tax laws.
I could? Hey, I had to do a reweaving job on this. Isn't that great?
Yeah. In fact, you could even talk to her in person. She's coming back to the district next week.
Yeah, but what would I say?
That you think the new tax laws are unfair. That, well, I could even say it for you.
Yeah, but she would listen to what one person thinks.
Well, you could always join an interest group, like the Citizens Coalition for Fair Taxes, for instance.
Yeah, well, I don't know, Julie. I'm not much of a joiner.
Maybe I could help you write a letter then.
I'll tell you what, you could help me press Mrs. Cooper Smith's banquet tablecloth and the 24 napkins that go with it. Then we'll talk about a letter, huh? Who knows? Might work.
I don't believe you. Now Scribs is talking about sending letters to Washington about getting the tax laws changed.
So, I think it's a good idea.
It's a rotten idea. You're getting his hopes up and he's going to be disappointed.
Well, at least I'm trying. You're not even doing that.
That's because I face facts. I'm not an idealist like you.
Just leave me alone, okay?
With pleasure.
So, class, let's welcome Congresswoman March.
Good morning, class. I'm here to talk with you this morning about the legislative process. So the steps that Congress takes to pass tax laws are called the legislative process. And at each step of the way, people whose interests are affected by changes in the tax laws make their views known to our elected representatives and to the president. For this reason, the final version of any tax law represents a blending and balancing of many conflicting interests. Now, Article 1 of our Constitution requires that all legislation concerning taxes must originate in the House of Representatives. There, the House Ways and Means Committee is responsible for initiating all tax legislation, which is presented in the form of a bill or proposed law. If a tax bill is passed by the House, it goes to the Senate Finance Committee. Before I go on, let me explain that tax policy is usually a compromise among various interests of citizens and the legislators. You see, as citizens, we have a right to make our views known on tax matters, and that right is guaranteed by the Constitution. As a result, members of Congress like me are often strongly pressured by groups that have been formed to achieve certain goals. Once the Senate Finance Committee approves a tax bill, it is voted on by the entire Senate. If it passes, a special conference committee tries to combine the House bill and the Senate bill into one. That isn't always easy. After the conference committee agrees on one version of the bill, that version is reported back to both the House and the Senate. There, votes are taken on the committee's compromise version. If it is adopted, the revised bill is sent to the White House for the president to sign into law, or he can veto it. A presidential veto, however, can be overridden by a two-thirds vote of both houses of Congress, which is another example of the system of checks and balances in our government. Are there any questions so far?
Representative March, when you talk about participating in the legislative process, could you be more specific about what we as students could do?
Of course. To begin with, it's often useful to join with other people to participate in the process. So if you have a special interest in any pending legislation, whether or not it has to do with taxes, you can always see if there's a local citizens' interest group of people who feel the same way. Then you can always write letters or telephone your representatives like me to make your opinions known. Participation could also include making speeches, attending town meetings or open sessions of the legislature. You could distribute leaflets or pamphlets. There's lots of things that you can do.
Well, but isn't it true, Congresswoman March, that a lot of times the laws don't get changed? That all those things you just suggested don't make any difference at all? That the people aren't listened to?
The people are listened to, Craig. It's just that sometimes what one person or special group wants isn't best for the rest of us. Isn't that right,
Well,
Congresswoman
what I'm
March?
saying is, sometimes to be heard, you have to go beyond writing a letter. You have to demonstrate and protest, right?
Demonstrations and protests are a less conventional way of participating, but orderly demonstrations are legal, and Americans have a long history of participating in public protests.
Then you admit, Craig, that people can try and make a difference in their government.
Well, as long as they realize that it may not work.
But then again, it may.
Yeah, all right. It may.
I knew I could convince you.
You didn't convince me, Julie. I convinced myself.
The content of Understanding Taxes was developed in cooperation with the Joint Council on Economic Education and school and economic education agencies from the entire United States. Funding was provided by the Internal Revenue Service. This program was produced in cooperation with Action Productions, Incorporated. Understanding Taxes was produced by the Agency for Instructional Technology.